Hello, I am Teresa Burris. I'm the Director of Appalachian Studies and the Director of the Appalachian Regional and Rural Studies Center at Radford University. And I am going to provide a very brief presentation to provide some information that usually will cover multiple semesters. So you're getting the very quick version of a presentation that I will share with you now. So this is called Many Appalachias, Myths and Realities. And so the first question is, what is Appalachia? Most people have something in their mind when you hear that term. So this is obviously showing the geographic area, but you can see the outline there, which I'm going to discuss. But if you look at this, the mountains themselves do not extend down into Mississippi, and they extend well beyond this border, this artificial border right here. So this is what we call the political definition of Appalachia. JFK is responsible for initiating this political region. You can read here what he did in terms of gathering these governors in 1960, meeting with the council in 61, and these were the original states. This has changed actually over time, the political outline of Appalachia. Harry Caudill, a very famous Appalachian author, he was an attorney in Eastern Kentucky, publishes this book, Night Comes to the Cumberlands, which brought a lot of recognition to primarily Eastern Kentucky. JFK actually had visited coal miners in West Virginia. Unfortunately, as we know, he was assassinated, and LBJ takes up the torch and declares a war on poverty in 1964 after he and his wife visited Eastern Kentucky. This is showing, actually you can look at the date here, effective October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 21. This is showing economically distressed counties in the region. If you go to the Appalachian Regional Commission's website, you can find all kinds of information, actually, different maps, reports that people have published all about the region, from healthcare disparities to other issues. So you can see why I'm saying the political definition, because why would these counties of Kentucky be included in Appalachia when the ones right under these areas are not? So and as I explained, the definition, the outline here has changed over time, multiple times. Today, the Appalachian regional, the region, according to the ARC definition, is all of West Virginia. That's the only state that is wholly within Appalachia, and then parts of these 12 other states. You can see how large, and you can see from that map, the region is. So 420 counties, 205,000 square miles, with a population of more than 25 million people. So it is not surprising when I say there is no one singular Appalachia or Appalachian. And here again, we're going to dive into this in just a bit. However, when most people hear the word Appalachia, they think it only includes West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Northeast Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and Southwest Virginia. Kind of if you just drew a circle around that area, that's what most people, when they think about Appalachians, that's where they put their map. So I want to talk about the caution, right? And I just mentioned this. You want to avoid, and a lot of these lessons are true, if not all, are true of other groups, right? It is very dangerous to reduce an entire people, and in this case, it's Appalachians, to one mold and one way of living in the region. It's important to recognize that Appalachians represent diverse ethnic backgrounds and races. So the Cherokee were here first. And as brush off the cobwebs from your history lessons in high school, probably, you learned about the Trail of Tears and Andrew Jackson's basic annihilation, either assimilate or be annihilated, federal programs. The Melungeons, which is a subgroup that got some recognition in the early 2000s. The Appalachians, this was a term coined by Frank X. Walker because he was tired of African Americans being absent from the history books of Appalachia, literature, and Latinx population. You have Asian Appalachians. One of my friends is Arab Appalachian. His parents are Arab, but he was born and raised in Bluefield, Virginia. We have different educational levels, socioeconomic statuses. Here again, there is no one Appalachian. And it's important to realize that different communities deal with different social, political, and environmental issues. There's no homogeneous Appalachian community. And it's really critical to appreciate the power of the media to reduce an entire people to one stereotype, or, as we're going to get into, some competing stereotypes. So the existence of an Appalachian core culture does not imply the non-existence of other subdominant cultures in the region. And in my normal presentation, which when I have time, I would actually address some of the values that Loyal Jones, an Appalachian scholar, talks about. And he was responding, it was in early 1970s, he was responding to all the negative images of Appalachia that were coming out as a result of the war on poverty, okay? But we don't have time to go into the values today. I want to point out the tensions that exist, and this is what Appalachian scholars have to live with. And this is true of feminist scholars, and here again, other schools of thought. There's a tension between Appalachian identity in the singular and Appalachian identities in the plural. So Fisher and Smith, they're editors of a text that I use in several of my classes, actually. It's called Transforming Appalachia. And they note the importance of place as a source of personal identity and motivating force in local and regional resistance struggles. So it's a political rallying cry, if you will. However, and this is where the tension comes into play, organizing in defense of place can also be exclusionary. Place, okay, and these are the examples, right? Just some, where the original inhabitants, I mentioned the Cherokee, Native Americans, are intentionally erased from the history. Place where hyper-heterosexual masculinity or femininity leaves no room for any deviation, quote unquote, from restricted norms. And we know that norms are socially constructed, typically by those in power. And then place where whitewashing of Appalachian communities denies any people of color. So stereotypes. You can find validating examples. My friends in West Virginia talk about when the media descend into West Virginia after some major event, usually a tragedy, the journalist, especially with video, will bypass every person until he or she gets to someone who fulfills the stereotype that they are looking for. Oftentimes, overalls, missing teeth, just a certain look, right? Okay. Just stereotypes, this is from Obermiller, Maloney, and Hansel. Stereotypes generally have a twofold nature. First, to ridicule the subject group because of its perceived difference from prevailing norms. Here again, the norms are socially constructed. And second, to provide rationale for active discrimination against the group. So let's look at some of these images, okay? And here again, I'm showing the competing, they're contradictory, actually. So some of the Appalachian man, right? Rugged, independent, and brave versus violent, lazy, bumbling, and depraved. We see the same thing with Appalachian women, innocent, beautiful, buxom, and hypersexualized young Appalachian women, or old before their time, too many children, they're masculine, hard workers because their husbands are lazy, right? Yet both sets of these images homogenize both Appalachian men and women, and both depict only white, heterosexual individuals. And it's important to note the body itself as a site of political and social contestation, all right? Here are the images, starting with Daniel Boone, great explorer, brave, going out into the wilds, actually to fight the Native Americans, right? Coal miners, another image that comes to mind of hardworking, blue collar, strong Appalachian men versus the lazy. This is actually taken from my friend Tony Harkin's book, Hillbilly, A Cultural History of an American Icon, which is a fabulous read. And you can see on here, this is a cartoon that he's referencing going back to 1934. And it's showing, you can see here, wonder if Ma's had her baby yet. I'm getting mighty hungry. That's the caption on this. All I have to do when I'm giving a presentation is say feud, and everybody knows Hatfields and McCoys. This was there were feuds going on all over the country during this time based on land disputes and other matters. And usually it was around power and money. A journalist in Kentucky, editor of a paper, was wise and saw that these stories were selling outside of Kentucky. And so this is how this got to be blown up to represent all of Appalachia. We're a feuding, violent culture. Some cartoons, you can see the date here, started in 1919. If we deconstruct this image, you see the moonshine, you see the gun, he's unkempt with the patches, he's asleep, probably drunk, right? All fulfilling all those negative stereotypes. Looking at another cartoon, this one dating back into the early 20th century. Look at the readership, not only in America, but internationally. 100 foreign papers in 28 countries. And here again, if we deconstruct and look at these images, especially here on the right, the black and white, okay? As I said, the young, hypersexualized, buxom mountain girl, the bumbling buffoon, young, brawny Appalachian boys. You can't, it's hard to even tell what gender this character is. And it's the old granny woman. She's got a pipe, right? She looks mean. Here's her ignorant husband, lazy, with his pants undone, okay? So let's look at what happens then. This gets transferred, that same imagery gets transferred into the Beverly Hillbillies. You can see those same images there, and the Dukes of Hazzard. And everywhere, all the images I found of the Dukes of Hazzard, Daisy is always wearing her Daisy Dukes, the short shorts, right? Hypersexualized. So some common regional stereotypes. We talk funny. When I did my undergraduate work at Emory University, I grew up, so my mountain creds, I grew up in Northeast Tennessee, in Bristol, went to Emory in Atlanta, and I was made fun of in my freshman dorm hall because of my accent. I was from the uncultured part of Tennessee because my roommate was from Nashville. We're clannish, going back to the feuding. Good old boy networks control local politics. Now remember I said, you can find validating examples. Appalachians refuse to challenge the status quo or to question perceived inequalities, which is basically saying we're fatalist. We don't do anything to improve our situation. We're religious fanatics. We're all Pentecostal snake handlers. And we're provincial and xenophobic, right? Narrow-minded, distrustful of foreigners. Okay, well, let's look at these another way, okay? We have a very distinctive linguistic dialect. And if you, and there's no, and let me say this, I need to have an S on there, dialects, because there is no one Appalachian dialect. There, even within Southwest Virginia, where I live now, between Bristol and Abingdon, my Appalachian soulmate, I call her, she's one of my best friends. She grew up just an hour from here in Pound, Virginia. Well, she says light, and I say light, even though we grew up just an hour apart from each other. Our society is based fundamentally on family ties, very strong relations with family members. Our social structure is based on kinship. We see our ties to community as a source of identity and social organization. We're not all snake handlers. They're primarily, and this is still true today, you can go into some really small Appalachian communities up in the hollers and you'll see several independent Protestant churches. Now, you will also see, because here again, we're not monolithic, you will see Catholic churches. There was a thriving Jewish community in the region. There still are Jewish people in the region. And instead of looking at us as provincial, we have a strong sense of place. Land and our environment are very important to who we are and our identity. So you've got these competing theories and schools of thought about who we are, right? So the deficit theory is basically saying those Appalachians are all dumb and ignorant and poor because of their moral failings, versus the internal colonization model, which gained some traction in the 80s with Appalachian scholars, actually. And it was saying that if you look at colonization, like how England colonized the Middle East or India or whatever, Appalachia is an internally colonized region. Well, that doesn't hold up. There are problems with that, because there are plenty of, I'm going to call insiders, Appalachian insiders, that took advantage of their neighbors just as much as outsiders. Now, I will say that we, especially central and southern central Appalachia, are primarily owned by absentee landowners to this day. Okay, so think about the consequences of that. Then we get to what I use is a structural systemic critique. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples of this. And here again, it's important to look at the power of myth. Myths persist long after facts come out to dispute those myths. And usually because those myths are serving a purpose for those in power. Okay. So here are some critiques. Black lung. All right. For those of you who don't know what black lung is, it is where miners, because of the exposure, let me say this, black lung is preventable. If coal industry, if the coal mine owners do what they are supposed to do. There are all these laws and policies on the books to prevent black lung, but as you know, you can have all those laws and policies, and unless they're enforced, they don't mean anything. So you can see these are all newspaper headlines. And I will make sure that you all have a copy of this so that you can, they're hyperlinked, so you can check out some of these. Especially look at Johns Hopkins University, okay? One of their doctors, who was a radiologist, was responsible for not finding black lung in every miner that the lung x-rays that he was a radiologist that he evaluated. What happened was a investigative journalist followed a coal miner to his grave, did an autopsy. They had an autopsy done. The man had advanced onset black lung to prove what was happening. And then what was discovered was that the doctor was being paid by industry. So this is what I'm talking about, systemic critiques. This is a slide showing the spike here in black lung cases despite the laws that were created. So you see this downward trend, and I don't have time to go into the reasons why. And this is showing progressive massive fibrosis, which is complicated black lung because of silica adding to the coal dust. Another systemic critique, Appalachia and northern Maine were the hot spots rural Maine were the hot spots for the opioid crisis. Well, it didn't become a national crisis until it left our borders. And what was discovered here again by investigative journalists is that Purdue Pharma actually targeted Central Appalachia because of the high blue-collar, hardworking individuals. Same thing in Maine with the timber industry. And actually had databases showing doctors' prescribing patterns, lied about the addictiveness of the drug. Yes, so you can see here again, these are all newspaper headlines. So I'm out of time. I was trying to go fast. I want to leave you all with some provocative questions. Okay, so how do you define community? And let me back up here, okay, right? Especially in our climate today. I am the mother, I'm the white, middle-class, middle-aged mother of an 18-year-old biracial son. The way that I define community is very different, and the way that I navigate community is very different than my younger 18-year-old son. What's the demographic of your community? Whose voices dominate the conversation? Whose voices are absent? What community systems or structures exist that create either unintentionally or intentionally social inequities? And finally, what systems, if any, are in place to empower the marginalized? So I'd like for you all to think about these questions and address them. And that is all that I have got for today, and thanks for watching.